In 1983, aspiring writer Louis Venosta was lamenting the lack of martial arts movies with black heroes. It's not that there weren't any, it's just that it was a rarity. He was a huge Bruce Lee fan and dreamed of making a big martial arts movie with a black lead. His girlfriend told him to stop complaining about it and go write his own, which is exactly what he did. He wrote the script in about a month, and after sending it to a few places, it was discovered by car wash director Michael Schultz. Schultz loved the script and begged the studio to let him direct it. He said from the moment he read it, he knew it would be a hit. The studio agreed he was the right one for the job and hired him to direct. However, the movie as it was would have been way more than the studio could afford, so Schultz and Venosta set about to rewrite the script. They took turns writing and were eventually able to shave about $2 million off the production. They didn't touch the story, they just removed or scaled back some of the bigger fight sequences. The studio approved them for a modest $10 million budget, and they moved on to casting. The movie was being produced by Berry Gordy, the founder of Motown Records. With Gordy on board, that granted them access to a wealth of great music. That also helped them to find the actress Vanity. Vanity's real name was Denise Matthews, but she changed it to Dee Dee Winters when she got into acting. In 1980, she met Prince, who convinced her to change it to Vanity, and helped her front her own all-girl group, Vanity 6. When Vanity auditioned for the role of Laura Charles, they knew she was perfect. In 1980, the novel Shogun was adapted into a 9-hour TV miniseries. The novel had a resurgence in popularity when Venosta was writing the script for The Last Dragon, which inspired him to create Sho'nuff, the Shogun of Harlem. Casting for Sho'nuff proved difficult as they couldn't find anyone that felt right. Finally, they met the 6'5" Julius Carry. He had the right presence for the film, but there was one problem. He didn't know any martial arts. They figured by having some martial arts trainers work with him, as well as some stuntmen, they could pull it off. The most difficult person to cast was the lead, Bruce Leroy. They went through loads of casting sessions, but couldn't find anyone who had the naive charm of the character, as well as the martial arts skills. While they could fake it with Sho'nuff, they felt it was essential to have the actor playing Bruce Leroy to be proficient in martial arts. Around this time, New York kickboxing champion Taimak was working with his karate instructor, Ron Van Cleef. Van Cleef was known as the Black Dragon, and on top of being a stunt coordinator, had starred in many of his own kung fu movies. Van Cleef was hired to be one of the stunt choreographers for the movie, and told Taimak he should audition. Taimak was immediately cast in the lead, but had the opposite problem of Carey. He was a brilliant martial artist, but couldn't act. They had some acting coaches work with him, and once they were confident, they moved forward. The movie had 3 different fight choreographers. Ron Van Cleef worked with Julius Carry for the more aggressive styles of martial arts. Torrance Mathis worked with Taimak for the more fluid styles, and Ernie Reyes Sr. worked with his son, Ernie Reyes Jr., for the kids' choreography. Since the movie would have a fair amount of dancing as well, they brought in Lester Williams, who was the dance choreographer for Saturday Night Fever. Rounding out the cast was Christopher Mirny as the evil Eddie Arcadian, and Faith Prince as Angela Veraco. With the cast in place, they started their 44-day shoot. In the 1980s, many productions refused to film in New York due to it being too expensive. They often shot in Canada and made it look like New York. Schultz insisted on shooting in New York because it had a look he felt he wouldn't be able to get elsewhere. Many of the interiors were shot in Silver Cup Studios, which was an old bread factory converted into shooting space, mostly for commercials. They also shot in an empty warehouse near the studio. For the club, they used an actual dance club they rented out for a month. Schultz wanted the film to be like a live-action cartoon, which is why so many of the characters are ridiculously over the top. Schultz and Venosta made the film as a parody, spoofing the things they loved, and poking fun at others. The obvious thing being a parody of kung fu movies. But there was plenty more. They flipped the world the movie inhabited on its head by having black guys act Chinese, and Chinese guys acting black.
I am looking for the master.
Ain't no masters here, dude. Ain't no slaves either.
This was all part of the intentional cartoonish nature of the film. For the music the fortune cookie guys were dancing to, they just wrote a bunch of nonsense.
Anything! Sukiyaki hot sake su! You sake to me, I sake to you! I said, okay. Sukiyaki hot sake su! You sake to me, I sake to you.
Angela was a complete lampooning of Cyndi Lauper. For the Dirty Books music video, they were goofing on Madonna and music videos in general. For Angela's music, they purposely wrote it to be awful but catchy. So even though it was bad, you still felt like it could be a hit. Seventh Heaven was a parody of Soul Train. Sho'nuff's outfits were designed to make him look like a kabuki samurai. With Gordy producing the film, he used it to push one of his rising stars, El DeBarge, with gratuitous usage of his hit single, Rhythm of the Night. When Leroy broke the arrow in the beginning, it wasn't a special effect. They had an area where they were firing the arrows, and he kept chopping at them until he got one. Taimak did all his own stunts. As a way to help Leroy seem more innocent, they had him speak without using contractions.
Are you okay?
They did not harm me.
When Leroy was venting his anger, they purposefully had him in a partially red room, hitting a red bag with red gloves, wearing a red belt. With the tight schedule, they had to shoot the club fight in 2 days, while most productions would have spent weeks on it. Ron Van Cleef is the henchman in the mask in the club fight. The director's son Brandon was the kid in the movie theater. The glow effect for Leroy in Sho'nuff was done by rotoscoping, a technique where artists trace over footage frame by frame to achieve a desired effect. While filming the scenes, they'd flash a light on the actor being hit to help enhance the effect. Schultz admitted the reds and blues were an homage to the lightsabers in Star Wars. Leroy, wearing the yellow and black jumpsuit, was an homage to Bruce Lee in Game of Death. Towards the end of filming, they ran into a major problem. During parts of the film, they had planned to insert footage of Bruce Lee movies. Unfortunately, they were having trouble acquiring the rights. They were prepared to fake it if necessary, but it wouldn't have the impact that they were going for. Thankfully, at the 11th hour, they got the okay and were able to secure the footage, although they said it wasn't cheap. The film was released on March 22, 1985, and was a hit, pulling in over $33 million. This was one of TriStar's earliest films, and was their biggest hit up to this point. The film resonated mostly with a younger audience, but critics also enjoyed it. Over the years, the movie's been referenced, and even given an homage in the music video, Dangerous by Busta Rhymes.
Am I the meanest? Sho'nuff. Am I the prettiest? Sho'nuff.
He really does nail that Sho'nuff impression. From the time when Venosta wrote the script to the time it hit theaters was about 2 years, which is insanely fast and practically unheard of back in 1985. For years, the movie was rumored to be on the remake block, with Rihanna in the vanity role. Thankfully, that doesn't seem to be happening. The Last Dragon is an amazing movie. How many films are out there that can be called a Motown martial arts musical? This is one of those movies where it's impossible to not enjoy yourself. The action, the music, the humor, they all blend together seamlessly. Beyond that, with the larger-than-life characters, colorful locations, and ridiculous villains, the movie absolutely influenced the game's final fight and Streets of Rage. Some of the cast who had smaller roles went on to much bigger things. Keisha Knight Pulliam played Leroy's little sister, who went on to be Rudy in The Cosby Show after this. Chaz Palminteri was one of Arcadian's thugs. William H. Macy was JJ, the guy Arcadian was blackmailing. Faith Prince went on to be big in Broadway after this. And Ernie Reyes Jr., who would go on to be a badass in movies like Red Sonja, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2, and Surf Ninjas. Vandy unfortunately died in February of 2016 of kidney failure. She'd been battling drug addiction since the 80s, and became a born-again Christian in 1995 after an almost fatal overdose of crack in 1994. In 1993, Julius Carry would go on to play Lord Bowler in the beloved short-lived show The Adventures of Briscoe County Jr. While he was most famous for playing Sho'nuff, he said his favorite role was Lord Bowler. Sadly, he died in 2008 of pancreatic cancer. I adore this movie. It's got heart, it's fun, and it presents a very positive message. To find the strength within yourself to overcome life's obstacles, and to kick evil in the face.
Get away from me, you dumb broad!
Oh, Banana, you're